Welcome. So I'm Jamie Austin. I'm with Tipping Point Community in San Francisco, and I head up our Insights and Analytics team, our Impact and Learning, our Data Science team, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit more about how we use Trifacta and Tableau in fighting poverty in the Bay Area. I'm going to speak first about Tipping Point, and then we'll get to a couple examples with Trifacta and Tableau. Okay, so Tipping Point's challenge is that 1 in 5 people in the Bay Area can't afford to meet their basic needs. So that's about 1.3 million people in the Bay Area. That's the 6-county Bay Area. So that's our challenge. And our solution, or what we do, is that we work very closely with 43 nonprofits, organizations that are reducing poverty in some way. And we specifically are interested in the areas of early childhood, education, employment, and housing. And our model is a little bit different than other grant-making organizations in that we bring on an organization, and that organization is intended to stay in our portfolio. We don't just grant for a year and then run. We really see our organizations as being long-term partners. In addition to these 43 organizations, we also have a T-Lab. It's a kind of our R&D shop, our in-house R&D shop. And the idea is that nonprofits don't get a chance to experiment with new ideas, test new things, and so we really want to give them the space to fail, to learn from the data, to learn from client voice. So that's a really integral part of Tipping Point's model. The other thing we've started last year was we have a $100 million fund. We're working with the City and County of San Francisco to have chronic homelessness in 5 years. That also has a pretty big data component as well. And then lastly, the City and County also has a fines and fees project. What we're trying to do is to right-size or to eliminate those fines and fees that have a deleterious impact on low-income people. And last year, actually last fiscal year, we worked closely with TIBCO Data Science on a project to reduce the citations for low-income people. We found in the data, looking at 7 years worth of data, 5 million records, that low-income people had, for the same citation, were going to pay a lot higher rate than non-low-income people because of the late fees that hit pretty quickly after someone gets a citation. So we were able to actually reduce the debt and the citations for low-income people using data. And the interesting thing about the data part of this is that both the mayor's office and the head of our local transportation agency said, we had no idea this was going on until we saw the data. In fact, we try to do everything we can to reduce poverty, to reduce the hardship on low-income people, and then we realize this is going on. So kind of just speaking to the power of data and hopefully to Tipping Point's role in that. Okay, so Tipping Point's been around for 13 years. We were founded in 2005 by Daniel Lurie. Since that time, we've raised more than $200 million and given that out. And last year, we put on a pathway out of poverty 22,000 people. And I'll talk a little bit more about what it means to put someone on a pathway out of poverty and that 22,000, because that's kind of what we think about a lot. So as I mentioned, our model is a little bit different from other grant-making organizations. We don't have an endowment. We don't want an endowment. We think the low-income people need money, and the organizations that help low-income people need money. So we raise the money, we give it out, and then we start again in the new year. So this past year, we raised $95 million, and then we start over in zero in the next year. That's how we work. These are some examples of our corporate partners. They are partners in two senses. One is they give very generously to Tipping Point. And the nice thing about our model is that our board of directors covers our salary and operating costs, our rent costs, all of it. So when someone like our corporate partners, our donors, my mom, when she gives to Tipping Point, she's giving to the organizations that we fund or the causes that we fund. She's not funding my salary. The other great thing about these corporate partners is that they provide to us pro bono management assistance in areas that the organizations or Tipping Point wouldn't already have access to. So just looking up there, there's really a wealth of knowledge, experience that we just don't have, and it would be extremely expensive for us to buy. Okay, so as part of our model, at least in the shop that I'm in, or certainly in Tipping Point generally, we have a strong commitment to data that really kind of drives us and helps inform our work. And we think of our data in kind of in three ways. The first way is, as you might think, from an organization that gives out money, we want to know what happened to it. And we want to know about the outcomes that hopefully came as a result of the money that we gave. The second one is we really want to help organizations better understand the sort of data context that they're in. So for example, we have a 6-county survey that we're doing with UC Berkeley to better understand the experience of low-income people. So that's looking at both the data, following people over time for a year, the data, their experiences with things like, can they pay a utility bill? Can they afford to put food on the table for their families? Have they been pulled over by the police? Things like that. And then we're hoping to talk with a smaller group of them to really better understand their coping mechanisms, their service-seeking needs and desires, I guess. We put that all together, and we try to better inform the field of philanthropy, our board of directors, our donors, and hopefully better understand poverty. Again, both for the grantees and the causes that we're supporting, but also just to make people aware of the fact that there are 1.3 million people in the Bay Area who can't meet their basic needs. That's a shock to most people who live in the Bay Area, often people in the Bay Area. Okay, so at Tipping Point, what really drives us are these outcomes. These are not outputs, to use some evaluation language. These are not the number of people who attended the session. These are not the number of people who went to school or who enter the program. This is very typical, you'll see it with the grant-making organizations. These are outcomes. And the nice thing about these outcomes is that all things being equal, attaining one of these outcomes does put you on a pathway out of poverty. We really actually do expect people to have higher lifetime earnings, or short-term earnings even, as a result of attaining these metrics. And you can see they kind of line up, both on the vertical axis with the areas in which we fund. Again, that's early childhood, education, employment, and housing, but also in kind of the lifespan as well. So we're looking at an early childhood, school age, transition age, and career age, or plus. The other thing to note here is that, as I mentioned, it's not just simply that we want to know from an organization that we're giving money to, okay, so for instance, how many people did graduate from high school? That's something that we would expect and they would expect to know. But who was it? What are the characteristics of those people? What can we learn from their experiences? So it's not simply the matter of like just pulling out this data point, sort of dangling it. We want to know everything we can about that. Who's getting there, who's not, what schools, for instance, what nonprofits, what policies are helping people reach these outcomes. Again, and all things being equal, these are the most powerful things that we can help people do. Okay, so now leading into how we use Trifacta. One of the things, as you could see on the last slide, math and English scores, particularly in the pivotal grades of 3rd and 8th grade, and also 11th grade, can really help us understand, at least directionally, where a student is heading. So in 3rd grade English and 3rd grade math are great predictors of high school graduation. 8th grade math and English are great predictors of college matriculation. So we want to know, generally speaking, is a school or what types of students are headed in that direction. So the state, this is the California State Department of Education, every year, actually around this time, they release data. And they release lots of CSV files and sort of overwhelming, to us, at least initially, very overwhelming things, but it was really important for us to better understand for our grantees what the experience was, and again, for the individuals as well. There are websites that the state provides. The state actually has an interface. But if you're really interested in a number of different schools, or again, you're really looking at different populations of students, race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera, it's really important to be able to take the data that the state is giving you and analyze it. I can imagine for the casual user, this is an overwhelming task. So we have proficiency data, that's for every single grade. The scores for that school, and again, by demographic. And this is for all the public schools and all the charter schools in California. So it's pretty, in some sense, it's a really overwhelming data. And for the what the state releases is 9 CSV files with all the schools in it. And then they have an accompanying data, a demographic table as well. So this is kind of what the data looks like. This is probably just one school. But for those of you who are beginners to government data, this can be kind of overwhelming. And especially, it's a pretty quick turnaround for us. So you see all the a lot of the different standards that are met. We're not just looking at proficiency, whether someone met or didn't met. It's did they almost meet? Did they go far above it? Did they not do it? Did they fall short? And then you have all this data. Okay, so I'm actually here on behalf of my two colleagues, Ashley Brown and Nick Arevalo. This is Ashley's project, turn over this data pretty quickly to gather any insights that we can. And then she got to this and she said, oh, this is going to be tough. And it was actually just by chance that we came across Trifacta. So the one thing that she realized, and lots of folks know, this is from the former US Chief Data Scientist, DJ Patil, that in any one of these projects, most of your time is going to be spent cleaning data. It's a pretty overwhelming task, at least for our shop, who didn't necessarily have the skills to begin with. And the Trifacta team actually had already kind of replicated this idea. This number comes from them as well, from work they did at Stanford and Berkeley. Go Bears, by the way. So we knew that was an overwhelming task, and the things you're going to be looking at when you do a project like this are things like joining files, joining tables, cleaning data. There's too many commas. There's asterisks. I'm looking at data right now from the state. It's financial data that's all text field. So you got your parentheses and your your commas, and it's overwhelming to think about it. I'm a Stata programmer. It's overwhelming to think that that's the case. So we know that data cleaning is the most important thing. Okay, so what's the solution? The solution is actually join these files. So you take all the data from all the different schools and the demographic information, you join them together, and you do lots and lots of cleanup, which again, in something like Stata or Excel, is going to be pretty overwhelming, especially with these big files. We're also going to rename variables too. And the thing about renaming variables is, I don't know about you all, but I'd like to keep track of what I named and renamed. It's kind of tricky to keep that, especially if somebody else is going to be doing the work. Okay, we're going to look at an actual flow in a minute, but this is kind of what it looks like in Trifacta. We have the files on the far left there. We're going to do something to them. We're going to remove some commas and arrows, things like that. And then we're going to join them all together. And so that was a representation that we wanted to do. I had no idea it was going to be as easy as it was. And then in Trifacta, there's a recipe as well. So we're going to start this one off with the big kahuna, which is to join these tables together. We're going to keep, since this is overwhelming, we're only going to keep those grades that are important to us, and then we're going to do lots of other things. This is just a short example of what's going to happen. Okay, so again, I mentioned joining different tables together, and so again, we're going to take the 8 different tables of all the schools, and in Trifacta, we can do this actually pretty simple. It actually allows us, the union will allow us to figure out for any database how they would all join together. The task that Ashley was going to do is which I would have done in the absence of this, is I would have cut and pasted 9 different tables together. Without this, this is what I would have done. And as you can realize, lots of errors will happen as a result of that. The other cool thing about Trifacta that we did is I kind of mentioned before, not only does it automatically help join data sets by giving you kind of recognizing patterns and then giving you the opportunity to see what the pattern is, but also, as I mentioned before, in a lot of the work that I've been doing in another project as well, it kind of recognizes, is this what you want to do? Could this be the script that you would write? Or is this what you want to do? And then it doesn't even offer you the script sometimes. It just allows you to click and say, yes, that's what I wanted. Thank you so much. So we found this to be really useful. I'm finding this useful, especially going over this financial data, because in the absence of that, I would have lit myself on fire. We're going to go to, do you want to go? We're actually going to go into Trifacta for a minute and see how this works. I've got Cindy from Trifacta here. So we've got, this is the actual data set. I have my recipe there. This is the union. And you can actually see, even though it's a little dark right now, that you can see that the variables match up really nicely. I don't have to think about this. It recognizes for all of these, that this is actually a nicely done one in some cases, but that it recognizes that all the variables that need to be joined, and it would have alerted me if there was a problem at the state, which the state can do, change the name of a variable. That would have been, I would have gone along and made the assumption that this variable means this when it does not mean that. If you're working with government data, it's important to know that. So let's go to the union. Sorry, the join. So now I'm going to take the data that I've just joined, and then I'm going to do a union. This is union or join? This is join? This is join. Sorry. Right. So we're going to join this part of the data set to the others. Again, in Excel or in Stata, this would have been a nightmare. I actually made it so easy to do. I'm actually, in a project I'm doing now, I'm doing the same thing. It works wonderfully. And it highlights areas that would have been a problem. And as I mentioned, in the recipe, also just things like the renaming or moving one column to another or changing the last one, 15, is my personal dream. Changing variable types from string to numeric really easily. It provides lots of different options for doing that, and it kind of recognizes what you might be thinking about. Worked out really well. Great. Yep. Okay. So the other example I have is from our work with Tableau. So in workforce development, so that's organizations that are helping people gain the skills that they need to get jobs. So that's both the hard skills and the soft skills, you think about that. What we would like to know is, did the people who are these job seekers, did they get the job? And then how much money did they make? That's an important factor. Now, some people might think that's just crass, but it's important. If you're underemployed or unemployed, it's an important thing to know how much people made ultimately as a result of these programs. And lo and behold, if you didn't know this, you would think that the data is really easily available, and that's absolutely not the case. What happens after someone gets the job, if they get the job, and sometimes you don't know they got the job because they go off leaving the program with you not knowing that, you have to call them, contact them, SurveyMonkey them, text them, please tell me how much you're making. How awkward is that? Tell me how much you're making. Did you have the same job? You started a job, but did you lose that job? Now, for a lot of people, especially low-income people who are trained in jobs where they are contract in nature, they might go from a job to job, and we might not know if they still have that job. And again, it's really awkward. But organizations, nonprofits that are in charge of this, they are bound to do this. They have to do this as part of nearly all the contracts that foundations give and government ones. And it's even given the awkward name Verification of Employment, or VOE. You can see it's a government thing because it's a TLA, a three-letter acronym. But we just don't have that sense. And for even those companies or nonprofits that are really aggressive about trying to find out, did you get that job? They call people. They in some ways they hound people, but they need to because they want to find out not only to report to their funders, but find out how are folks doing that data wasn't available. So we recognized this was a problem, and we approached the California State Department that's responsible for this. In California, that is the Employment Development Department. And we assumed that they would say, go take a hike. We're not giving any information. Turns out they've been a dream partner, which is really great. So this is what happens. For any one of our organizations, they can request data from EDD, and they can get that back to us and the organization. And from that, we have years and years of data, not only in the year in which they got the job, but going forward and moving back. So we can go back all the way to 1995. You want to know the kind of employment cycle or the wage cycle of someone, you can go all the way back. The one hitch to this, though, is that this is cohort data. So I can't find out what you are making, but for an organization that treats a cohort of people at a time, it's very, very helpful to know how do they do in the long run. In the absence of this, we wouldn't know that. And then the organization can also submit characteristics about those about those job seekers. It's important for them to know the kinds of people who got those jobs and who didn't get those jobs. But here's the problem. If the data came back like this, so this is just one tiny little piece. So in this instance, we got the 1995 data for groups of types of people that finished a program, people that dropped out of a program, And this starts at 1995. This goes all the way over to 2018. And this also looks at their mean wage, their median wage, standard deviation, number of people who made more than $5,000 a year, the number of people who did it, and the columns go on and on and on. And we were completely overwhelmed by this task. And so we actually spent, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, we actually spent part of the summer in Excel trying to map, figure out what patterns are there for this organization who bravely submitted their information, and how can we make it better? And so my colleague Nick came up with Tableau, and of course we should have thought about this before, but I'm so glad that Nick suggested it. So I'm going to show you this is a screenshot, but then I'll show you actually going to Tableau Live, what it looks like. So again, the miracle thing about this is this data was not available. What you typically got is about 20 people responding to your requests, your hounding, and this is 100%. And these are the actual wages. These aren't what I made last month. These aren't what I think I made last month because of the contract job. You may not know that. In the top row, if the bar here, you're going to see the monthly wage for people who completed out the program. And if you look, I have 3 years up, 2005, 2011, and 2017. I have a yellow vertical line, which suggests the time at which the person started that program. So you can interesting thing to note here, as we get closer to that point, you can't see that for 2017. In 2005 and 2011, you can actually see the dip. Okay, so and that dip usually means that people are going to start looking for a program. They're underemployed or unemployed, and they are seeking services. Similarly, you'll see in the 2005 and 2011, the bottom bar, which is the percent of those people who are employed, who actually got a job, you can see a spike after the year that they were in employment. So you can see that a slower rise for the wage, and you can see a spike after the 2005 and 2011. I'm actually going to go there now. The other nice thing to note, we'll go there live, is that for this organization, they wanted to know, they had hypotheses about who was or who wasn't getting those jobs and keeping those jobs. Here, they were interested in age and gender and a number of other characteristics. Click. So I have right here. So this is the data. Let's look at, and so the great thing is being able to share this with organizations so that they can internally ask questions, report on to their funders, and just know how people are doing, which they did not know before. Again, I can play around with the, if I want to know how the women are doing versus the men, I can do that. The interesting thing about one of the organizations that we work with actually saw year over year that the men were making a lot more than the women, and that highlighted to them that they needed to start doing something different about their program, working with their partners that are hiring their candidates, and see what they can do. So we've already seen some definite changes in program, but the most exciting thing for us has just been the impact on having the information, and then having people from that ask different questions. We have gender here. We just have 2 here. Age gets to be a little bit of a, but if I wanted to look specifically at, say, one group, I can do that. Again, this is just access to information that they just didn't have. And then the really nice thing is that not only can people use the information in their programs to better define or find out who's getting a job and who's keeping that job, but a really powerful thing is that nonprofits are also in the business of raising money, raising funds. And I would say that the go-to is usually, in this field, is you provide a story about someone who's got that job and who has done well over time. And you might actually use that 20% of the data that you had collected to say, this is how my group is doing. This is how the 2013 cohort is doing. And because that's the best that you can do. Well, now this is the best that you can do. And so what the organization did, our first organization, Opportunity Junction, based out in East Contra Costa in the East Bay Area, is said, okay, I'm going to now use this information to tell our story. And the nice thing about our story is it's not one story. Those are powerful. But it's not the actual data, and it's not 20% of people. So I don't have to not know about the other 80%. So in this example, what this organization did was they were able to say, these are the people who completed the program. This is how they do over time. This is how their wages rise. And then there are other people who we have information on. These are people who applied the program or the people who withdrew from the program. Not exactly similar, but good enough to say, are we headed in the right direction, directionally? And so I think it's just a very powerful example for an organization to be able to do that. And other organizations have already done this. We're already seeing a wave of people being able to talk about what they're doing. That's tipping point. That's our use of data. That's our using Trifacta and Tableau. So I just want to thank Trifacta and Tableau for really opening doors for us and being able to, again, help us with our obsession for core metrics and help us better understand in these two instances what we can do and how we can do it better. Don't forget to fill out that survey I guess I'm supposed to ask. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.